I died and learned how to live. For a total of 8 minutes, I was pulseless. They documented, because I not only spoke with my doctors, but I requested my records, and it's documented 8 minutes asystole. Really, the energy, it never dies, ever. That's what we say happens to us. I died, but there is no death. It'll happen. I'm not afraid.
The A.J. Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast.
We are here with Krista Gorman, and she had a very unique near-death experience when her heart stopped for 8 minutes while she was on her way to giving birth. She not only left her body and went to otherworldly dimensions, but she also came back with a message. So hello, Krista, how are you?
Hi, AJ, I'm great.
So what can you tell us about the events that took place before your experience and what led to that moment?
I was in my last 3 weeks of PA training, physician assistant at the time. We're physician associates now. This was in 2000, and I was pregnant nearly my entire second year of PA school. And I had graduated 3 weeks before I was due. My delivery was induced, and that was because Maggie, my daughter, was found to have an abnormality with one of her kidneys very early during the pregnancy. And there was a concern about that kidney function, and the recommendation had been made to deliver her a week early, so to induce me. I just was a little reluctant about the induction part, but I felt like I needed to place my trust in my doctors and their, what they were recommending. So I agreed to be induced and to have her a week early. So leading up to going to the hospital, the night before, I was a little contemplative, just wondering, just excited about meeting her. We knew we were having a girl, and just wondering what she would look like, and just wondering how it all would all go. And I wrote in my journal, I wonder who will visit me in my dreams tonight. And I don't recall knowing, I didn't really have an inkling of what that was or what that meant, but it was just something I was just, contemplating. So the evening of July 16th, I went to the hospital. They started the induction, and they needed to give me an antibiotic through the IV. And they delivered the antibiotic, and I started to have palpitations, heart palpitations. And they stopped it immediately, and they're like, oh, well, you must be allergic to penicillin. And oftentimes pregnant women can develop allergies to medications during pregnancy. So I had never been allergic to it before, but I had evidently developed an allergy. So they switched the antibiotic, and I went through the night with the induction going, with uneventful. And by the morning, I had only dilated about 3 centimeters. And with the medication they use to induce contractions in the mother, it causes abnormally strong contractions. So it's not like the natural gradual onset of contractions that you'll find with a natural labor. It's quite synthetic, unnatural. So I was in a lot of pain, and I asked for an epidural. I was given the epidural without incident, doing fine. And then about maybe 20 minutes later or so, I looked at the monitor, and I see that I can't feel the contraction, but you can see the contractions on the tracing. And for the fetal monitoring, and I saw that my baby's heart rate dropped to about 60 during a contraction. And it has to happen one time. Medically speaking, it happens one time, and you go in for a C-section right away, because it indicates that there's distress with the baby. So I knew what was coming, that I would be needing to go have a C-section. And I remember that was the second sort of feeling of, I don't want to have to do this, but I'll do whatever, of course I'll do whatever I need to do. And what's needed is an internal monitor to be put on the baby's scalp, because she was crowning a little bit. And so the nurse midwife came in and was putting the monitor into Maggie's scalp, and she must have reflux. They say the babies don't feel it, but I think what happened was that she kicked really hard. She had a severe reaction to the pain and kicked really hard. And she kicked so hard, she kicked amniotic fluid into my bloodstream. Because at the time where the placenta is present in the womb, the maternal and fetal blood circulation is connected. So right away, I started having those same sort of fluttering palpitations in my chest. And I turned to my mother, who was on my left side, and I said, I'm having trouble breathing. And the nurse was there, and she went into action immediately. She pulled my mother out of the room. My ex-husband had walked out of the room for a moment, so he wasn't still there. And they put oxygen. Another nurse came in. They put oxygen on my face and started to wheel me out of the room. And the delivery OR for cesarean section deliveries was right across the hallway. And I was in that hallway when I was trying to breathe. I was hyper focused on breathing. That was my only concern. I need to breathe. My baby needs oxygen. I need to breathe. My baby needs oxygen. That's all I was focused on. There was no fear, no other concern in my mind except breathing. And it was like trying to suck air through a teeny little straw, and you're just desperate for it, but you can't get enough. And I took one last breath in, and I was told by a family friend that she could hear me out past the double doors in the waiting area. She could hear me trying to breathe. And I felt this presence come over me, sort of from behind and above me. And it was just this grace, this peace. And I closed my eyes. My next moment of awareness was of being high above the body below. And I didn't know it was me. I saw the body below. I saw people around it. And I watched as little black specks, like dots, like static, came racing up from the body. And the majority of it was the central area, to a lesser extent, the head and the lower body. But those particles came racing up to where my vision was and sort of surrounded me in this undulating, loose, static-like cloud. And I had no identification with anything physical, anything of the life I had before, of me being a human being, me being, a mother. But I was still Krista in my consciousness. So I was still my consciousness, my soul, my divine identity, I guess you could call it.
Did you recognize yourself when you
No.
saw that body? So
No.
Who did you think she was?
Nothing. I had no understanding of being human, or what humans were, or that I had come from Earth, or that I had been in that body. I didn't know it was a body. I had no identifying information about any physical things I was seeing, observing, experiencing, except that I had a feeling of complete neutrality, detachment, and yet I was still Krista. In my essence was still the I that I identify with here in this body, my consciousness.
What happened next?
So next, I watched as the doctor was on my left side. They were performing, and I only know this because I know what happened, but at the time, again, I didn't know what was going on behind me or below me. It was as if I was watching a movie that I had no understanding of anything that was in it. I was just watching it. It was very interesting. So I felt curiosity. I felt sort of a wonder about it. And I watched the doctor put something in a blue drape and then hand it to somebody very quickly at my right shoulder, who turned around, and I couldn't see what was going on. And I felt very curious about it. I wanted to know what was going on. And then I saw a man walk in the room, stand in the doorway, and then step up to where the body was down there. And I floated to the other side of the room, and there was somebody at my left shoulder, and they were doing something like this. And what I later found was they put a catheter in my chest, and he was threading a catheter into my pulmonary circulation. And I felt myself becoming more and more curious about what I was watching below and wanting to know more. And then as soon as I felt that curiosity grow, I felt a tug to my left, and I resisted it because I wanted to find out what was going on. I was so curious, and it pulled harder. And I said, okay, I'll go. And once I sort of relinquished my desire to stay, I was pulled out of there. My essence was pulled out of that room. I went through the wall. The wall was sort of this liquidy off-white, and it had a wallpaper border on the top that was also sort of liquidy flowing. And I went through the wall, and I was in this bright white flash of light, bright white space. And then I went through that the wall in that area, I guess, the divider in that space into the same particular matter I was, and I was moving imperceptibly fast. I couldn't gauge it, and there was no concept of time or space, except it felt completely expansive, like eternal, infinity. We try to put words to it, but you can't really describe the vastness of the space. And so I was sort of like reabsorbed into the same particulate essence that I was moving very quickly. And I turned to my left, and I saw the area to my left was that dense particles, and then it would turn sort of liquidy, grayish, white, black in one little spot, and then it would turn back into the dense particles. And I turned in my vision forward again, and I stopped abruptly, and there was like this funnel of information. It just sort of went funneling down to one point in front of me. And it was as if like all the questions I'd ever had in my existence were immediately answered just in an instant. And they all boiled down to one point, and that was love. And that's when I felt this penetration of love. It was just everything, all encompassing depth, like vastness and depth and density and lightness. It was just absolutely everything. And I was sort of just overwhelmed with it for a moment. And then I saw a white speck of light off in the distance, and I wanted to go to it, and it wanted me to come to it. So it was sort of like this mutual desire to connect. And so I started to move in that direction. And as I moved closer, it got bigger and bigger and bigger until it was a sort of a white, cloudy opening and then in the opening, there were shadow beings. And I can just describe them as humanoid, where they look like they had arms, thick, shadowy, gray arms, legs, torso, head, no distinct features. But there were bigger ones behind a smaller one that was in the front. And the smaller one had sort of the hint of like a little Tom Sawyer, like a wide brimmed shadow hat in overalls. I just had the impression that he was about 7 and he needed my help. And of course, I wanted to help him. So I didn't have an idea of what kind of help he needed, where I was going, what I was doing, none of that. It was just that I was there fully present. And I moved into the space. And as I moved into this cloud, it was like a cloud. The adult shadow being sort of like fanned out to my left, almost surrounded me because they were behind me as well, but I could sense them, but I couldn't see them. And they all wanted my help. I felt them all needing my help. And again, I don't know what that help exactly meant, except once I felt, yes, I want to help you, they started to dart at me and dart away and dart at me and dart away. And they were taking my energy. They needed my energy. So as soon as I realized that I was actually starting to sort of diminish, my energy was becoming less and less, then I felt, well, no, I don't want to stay here then. I wasn't afraid. I didn't feel that they were negative energies. They were neutral to me, but with the overarching energy of love in this space. So I wasn't afraid at all. It was just the next thing I did was chose to leave. And as soon as I felt that I wanted to go, the universe pulled me out of there. And I was back in the dense particulate space for a briefer time period, just for a brief sort of period of time, no time. And then I went through another opening, which was the same particulate matter, but it was sort of roundish. And I emerged into this gorgeous landscape that was a rock-covered, a mossy, rocks with moss on the left, with a waterfall coming down, and then dense evergreen forest to my right. And out in front of me spread these gorgeous, vibrant flowers, yellow flowers, huge field. And then at the end of it were green rolling hills dotted with trees and a blue sky. And it was just completely gorgeous. And I just merged with all of it. I merged with the flowers and the trees and the grass and rocks and all of it. And I was like one with this gorgeous, I called it my Eden. And I was raised Catholic, but I didn't have any, at the time, I wasn't practicing Catholic. I didn't adhere to any religion. I was probably what you would call more spiritual and more nature oriented than a religious practice oriented. And I just tried to be a good person. I tried to do the right thing. I tried to be fair and moral and all of that. So when I encountered this space, and I call it my Eden, is because I remember the stories that I would hear as a child about Eden and what it was like. And that's what this place was like. It was just completely divine. And so I was sort of like, was enjoying that feeling of being one with all this nature and the love. And then I was flanked by two very tall beings. I call them my angels, my guides. They were sort of beige in color, and they had drapey appearance, like a clothing, but no real faces. I couldn't identify faces, but everything was communicated through feeling. People talk about telepathy. There was no mind in any of my experience. There was no hint of my physical body being a thing. It was just pure consciousness. And so they felt to me, you can stay here, you can go to what is beyond this, or you can go back. And as I started moving backwards, as soon as I felt that back to them, I started moving backwards. And they turned and they communicated as I was moving back in the dark particulate matter. They communicated, if you go back, you need to share what you learned here. And I said, okay. I felt I could have stayed there eternally. I didn't have a sense of what came after that, but I had a feeling that it was going to involve, some other sort of space that I would be in, I don't know, forever. And going back, I had no memory of being human. So I didn't have a memory of being on this earth plane at all.
How did you interpret when they said that you had the choice to go back? Go back where if you did not recall it?
I didn't know. I didn't know what I was going back to, but I chose to go back. And then the next thing I know, I was feeling terrible pain in my chest, and I was essentially waking up in the ICU.
What happened once you recovered your consciousness? You were back at the hospital, right? And your baby
Yes.
had been born?
Yes, my daughter had been born by emergency C-section. My heart had stopped. I had stopped breathing. I had a cardiorespiratory arrest. So the amniotic fluid that got into my bloodstream, the body sees as foreign, and it sends this typical cells that it sends when a foreign body is in the bloodstream, and it forms these tiny little clots. Well, that blood circulated back up to my lung vasculature, blocked off the periphery of the lungs, and very quickly I wasn't able to breathe. Well, that caused my heart to stop. I was deoxygenated. I had no oxygen in my blood to pump my heart.
Did they have to revive you, resuscitate you?
Yes, they had to. They started CPR. They stopped it I was told, for 1.5 to 2 minutes. They stopped CPR completely, and to deliver my daughter, because I had started to hemorrhage, and that is often what follows an amniotic fluid embolism, which is what they believe I had. The person goes into a state of medical state called disseminated intravascular coagulation, where you lose your ability to clot your blood. Your liver stops making clotting factors. So I was bleeding out. And so they couldn't keep pumping my chest and let me bleed out, completely. I would have died on the table. So they stopped compressions, delivered my daughter. She was almost dead. She had a heart rate of about 60, and she was blue and limp, not breathing. So they resuscitated her, and she recovered very quickly, and was transferred to another hospital right away that had a neonatal ICU. This hospital I was in didn't. So she was taken and brought to that hospital, and I was kept in the same one that I delivered in and placed in the ICU.
Once she was delivered, they went back to you and they continued the CPR?
Yes, they continued the resuscitation effort. So for a total of 8 minutes, I was pulseless. So they documented, because I not only spoke with my doctors, but I requested my records, and it's documented 8 minutes asystole. So, so once she was delivered, they could start compressions. They had closed me up, the C-section. They could start compressions again, and they got me into the ICU. I was intubated, on a respirator, and they started to transfuse blood. So I think I received a total of 3 units of blood in the ICU, but I was only in the ICU for 2.5 days, roughly. I was placed in a medically induced coma because my body needed to recover, and it's pretty standard in these situations. So I was in coma for 36 hours. When I was stable enough to extubate me, so they took the tube out, and a short while later, I came to enough, because they were slowly decreasing the medicines to keep me in the coma as well. A short while later, I tried to leave the ICU. I unhooked everything and climbed over the railing of the bed and wanted to go. And as soon as I opened the curtain, I was spotted. And all my family was on me. The nurses were on me, getting me back into bed. And I remember that like it was yesterday. I can remember stepping with both feet onto the floor and feeling like I wasn't quite stable, but okay, yeah, I got my bearings. And then I flung the curtain open and they were on me like so fast. And I was so frustrated. I just wanted to go home. I didn't know where home was. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know I'd had a baby. But when they got me back into bed, they had all my family leave. And the nurse was picking up a blanket at the end of the bed. And she bent over and stood up. And I said, I'm Krista Gorman, and I'm a physician assistant. I'm going to be working for Dr. blah, blah, blah. Because I had a job lined up. I just graduated. I don't know where that came from. It came from somewhere. And she just looked at me with these huge eyes and she said, okay. And then she went and put it in my charts and quotes that I had said that. So there was hope. Like my family didn't know for 36 hours. They didn't know what kind of brain function I would have after 8 minutes of not breathing and my heart not beating. So although they did some CPR in the beginning and some at the end, there was that, 1.5 to 2 minutes where there was nothing going on. So they weren't sure what they were going to have. They were warned that I would need 24-hour care, that I wouldn't be able to do anything for myself. That was worst case scenario. Best case scenario was I fully recovered. And I've had I think I recovered pretty well.
Did you know that you had died, and did you remember your experience?
No, I didn't immediately recall it. I was completely oblivious to my life before. I didn't know that I had made this statement that I was Krista Gorman and I was a PA and I was going to be working for this doctor. All true. But in the next minute, I didn't recall anything about PA school. I had just finished. I'd studied my butt off for years and I'd passed my boards already. And I didn't recall anything about PA school. All I wanted to do was when, they told me you had a baby. I thought I had a boy. I thought I had twins. I kept asking questions. I didn't recall I'd been married to my then husband. I didn't recall any of that, but everything was perfect. Everything was fine. And then they told me, you had a baby. And I'm like, I want to see her, like, bring her to me. Well, you need to get better before we can do that. And that just made me so upset. But I wasn't crying about it. I was angry. But I'm fine and I want to see you. But and then in the next moment, I'd forget. So my brain was damaged and I was, it was trying to heal. It was trying to make connections. So my family was talked to by the neurologist and told how to help me to remember. And they said, okay, since she climbed out of the bed in the ICU, clearly she doesn't need the ICU. Let's put her in a private room. So they moved me down the hall. And on the 6th day, I met my daughter. And I was so excited. And they brought her to me and I held her. And inside I was elated. And I was like, oh, I'm seeing you again. Like I saw, like we already knew each other, And so I'm just holding her and she's, being her little infant self. And I thought, well, there's things that I'm supposed to do. So I decided I was going to undo the blanket and count her fingers and toes, which is what you do when you have a newborn, right? And my family's all watching me and we have video and my face is completely blank. There's no emotion in it. Yet inside, I was just so happy. I was elated. And I also felt that everyone could feel my elation. I felt that I didn't need to speak because there was no need for words. Everyone could feel what I'm feeling. And that's how the communication was in my NDE. yet. I didn't yet have the recall, my NDE.
So when did you remember what had happened? And how long did
Well,
it take for you to remember your own life?
it very slowly, it seemed like with each sleep, I would be a little bit better, a little bit better. I was told that it would take months and months for me to recover, and not to be too pushy with it, and just to let it sort of happen. There's nothing I had to do special to make myself recover quicker. So I just had to sort of go with it. And what I found was that really with each day in the hospital, I was a little bit better. And I got to like an aware enough state where I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm Krista. I had Maggie. I was married to Tom. I'm a PA, and I had this thing happen. But that didn't matter. The thing, the cardiac arrest didn't matter to me. I was so blissed out. I was just so like none of that. All that matters is like love and my daughter. Like that's all that matters. And so my family, of course, was taking care of me. And on the 8th day, I went home with Maggie. And I can still remember going into our place and my family being there and everyone making a big fuss, over Maggie. And I just was so lovingly detached from all of it. I was just sort of floating like, oh, yes, like, oh, now I'm going to get a drink. And now, oh, she's crying. So I'm going to pick her up and see, like, I instinctively took care of her. I just seemed to know what to do. She was my only daughter. I didn't have any more children after Maggie. But I knew instinctively what to do as a mother. And that was fascinating. Later, looking back, that was fascinating to me, that there was this just maternal instinct that came through, because my mind, I wasn't thinking, like processing and strategizing. And I didn't do any of that. I didn't have the capacity at the time. I was just in the moment, 100% in the moment. And that was bliss. That was so wonderful, because I had been type A personality before, like very high strung and very focused on being a PA and the science and all of that. And I came out from the cardiac arrest just a different person. Like, and I've maintained that, I know the science, but it's less, like it's less important to me. Like loving and connecting and all of that is so much more important.
So when did you recover the memory of your NDE?
Several months later. Like it seemed like, at home too, it seemed like I would go for, a week or two, and then I'd wake up and I felt like more like the old Krista. Like it was like peeling layers of an onion. That's what I liken it to. And I'm like, oh, I felt heavier. It was interesting. Like I felt denser, and I'm like, and I was a little sad, like it's like, oh, geez, like, oh, okay. Yeah, I'm more like how I was before. Like I recognized it. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm more like how I was before. And then one morning I woke up, I had the entire experience was present fully 100, like I was in it during sleep. So I woke up and I was like completely different. And like this is Krista like blissed out, but with the knowledge of why she's blissed out. And I was completely changed, transformed. I didn't have words like to even, I'm struggling now because it was so profound. It was such a depth of experience. Like I liken it, I say this when I share, I was transformed to the level of my DNA. I feel like my DNA was restructured. And I've just been so, like tapped in to the universe since then. And I yelled for my husband, my ex-husband, and he came into the room. He's like, what's going on? And I said, I had this, oh my God, like this experience, this is what happened. And I told him, and he was like, oh, wow, that's amazing. I'm just really glad you're here. Like, we thought we were going to lose you forever, and you're here, and we're just so happy. So it was kind of like a letdown at first when I first started talking about it. And so it took me a little while to kind of get up the nerve to even speak about it. And during that time, I emailed Jeff Long because he was a physician and he did research on NDEs. So I sent him an email and I said, I'm a PA. I newly graduated. I think something may have happened when I coded. Not really sure. Just reaching out. Just wanted to connect and like get your input, whatever. And he sent me a very nice email back, and he said, pay attention to your dreams. So when he said that, I was like, oh my God, like this happened, because I was trying, of course, my science mind was trying to negate it in any way possible to make it so that, I'm like, oh yeah, you made it up or whatever. I'm like, no, I didn't. I was there. Like, it was realer than real. It was realer than this life. It was hyper real.
What happened when you started sharing this with your relatives and friends, and how did you get in touch with IANDS?
So it was a kind of a similar experience to sharing it with my ex-husband. There was the oh, well, that's amazing, but we're so glad that you lived, that you're still here. And so I kind of stopped sharing, and then very slowly I came around to IANDS. I was a part of David Sunfellow's group online a little bit first, so I kind of connected with a few people there. I found some people locally who had NDEs, and we met up one time and just chatted. But that wasn't through IANDS. IANDS I finally came to, I think it was 2014. Yes, it was 2014. And so this is 14 years later. I had finally decided I was going to truly focus and process my experience and integrate it into my life, because I had been pushing it away over the years, just trying to be in my profession and raise my daughter and be a partner in a marriage. And all of it together it felt very overwhelming being here. And I can manage a lot. I can manage stuff, but what I wasn't managing was my NDE and what I came back to do, which is to share the love that I experienced.
Do you think that IANDS played an important role in integrating your experience?
Actually, IANDS was sort of there in the periphery for me. For me, what helped me to integrate was to sort of sit with my experience. I started meditating, and I was able to process through my experience really in meditation, and then living my life. And what I learned was that there were forces in my experience at work that are the most powerful forces in the universe, and that is love and what is called the law of attraction. So in my experience, it was the law of attraction in action. And that phrase is used in the circles of people who adhere to the ideas of the law of attraction, what that involves. But it was literally, there was a desire, and it was met instantaneously without resistance, boom, by the universe. The universe, I feel my NDE was co-created. I created it with the universe. So those shadow beings taught me to choose me first in this life. I had spent my life being a helper, being, giving to a fault. And I needed to dial that back, and I needed to focus that love on me so that I could be authentically, clearly present for others, especially in my line of work. So that has really that part of my experience, the shadow beings, taught me that choosing myself is okay.
What are your feelings regarding death? How would you define it?
Oh, there is no death. I have a book I wrote years ago, I Died and Learned How to Live. And it's just because, I title it that because that's what we say happens to us, I died. But really, the energy, it never dies, ever. So I'm not afraid. It'll happen when it's, organically meant to. But I have no fear.
What do you presently do? And do you think that you are following that mission of sharing your story?
Well, it's evolved, really, the mission. It's these grades of being loving. So we can be loving and allow for others to be themselves, yet still be sort of harmed in that process because we're kind of giving ourselves away still and allowing others to be themselves and just kind of being in that space with them. There's a balance. So I'm still a PA. I still practice. I practice through COVID and COVID field hospitals, treating COVID patients. And that whole pandemic taught me so much about so many things. It opened my eyes very wide to our world and what sort of entities are actually present here that I closed my eyes to for so many years. But I've had multiple experiences that have shown me that I'm accurate in my belief that grounding in love will and is defeating the evil that is present in our world, and that love is the way to sort of, I guess you could say, prevail over it. Now, this is a whole other conversation, but it's my NDE. I carry with me it. I embody it. And at the same time, I am a warrior for myself, my family, my friends, the underdog, those who are suffering. And I will not sit back and allow for things to happen that I used to just sort of say, well, it's there, it's happening because it's there, it's meant to be there, which is true. However, I will now stand in my power of love and strength and oppose the evil.
How can people contact you if they're watching this video and are interested?
I have several ways. I have email. It's 12principles@gmail. And then I also have a website. It's kristagorman.com. Very easy. I'm also on Facebook. I'm on Instagram and all Krista Gorman. I don't have any kind of fancy, clever tag names. But I invite people to reach out. Absolutely.
Hi, I'm Janet Riley, and I'm the Executive Director of the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And I am thrilled to invite you to join us at our annual conference, August 27th to the 31st in Oak Brook, Illinois, just outside Chicago, where we will celebrate the 50th anniversary of the field of near-death studies. Join us for 4 inspiring days with more than 100 speakers, including the legendary Life After Life author Raymond Moody, University of Virginia Professor Emeritus Dr. Bruce Grayson, Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell of the Telepathy Tapes, the psychic lawyer Mark Anthony, and spiritual teacher Carolyn Mace, among others. You'll experience healing workshops, including meditation, Reiki, spiritual counseling, and our beloved bookstore with exclusive book signings, surrounded by others who share your interests and your experiences. Come make friends and become part of a warm, caring community that will beckon you to return. Every year, we welcome nearly 1,000 attendees and serve over 20,000 globally through educational resources and support groups. This warm, deeply connected community celebrates life and the life that follows. For nearly 50 years, IANDS has represented researchers who study near-death experiences and supported those who have had near-death experiences and experienced related phenomena. Our mission is to educate the world. Our hope is that by supporting research and people, and by communicating far and wide to reporters, podcasters, and through our website and social media, we can normalize discussions about death and the afterlife and help answer the very important question: what happens when we die? Our planet faces unprecedented challenges, and our conference offers a place to recharge, to be informed, to be healed and inspired. Register now at IANDS.org, that's IANDS.org, and become part of a gathering that informs, heals, and inspires. We hope to see you there.
This has been the AJ Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe.